I think we were pretty upbeat. We're pretty excited to, keep on fighting like that and come back and get that win. But, we realize that, we get to appreciate that for one day, and we got to move on because, we got another great team coming in here on Saturday, and we got to get ready for it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest installment of You Say Maize, I Say Blue. I, of course, am your host, Chris Cichon. This week joined by newcomer to the show here, Dave McCumber, in for Danny Sass, who has the week off for the holiday. Dave, welcome to the set. How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling pretty good. Just want to give a shout out to Danny Sass. He's observing the Jewish holiday today.
Suck up to the veteran who's off.
Welcome back,
week.
Danny. We'll see you next week.
Well, Dave, you know how we do things around here. You've been to the show a couple times. You can go ahead and say maize. I'm going to say blue, as in you must be feeling pretty blue if you left at halftime of the Wisconsin game this past weekend.
That you would be. You can say blue. I'm going to go ahead and say Maize, as in Corey Maize. I'm a Maize, the only athlete I could find with the last name Maize. A little help from Chris Cichon on that one. We're going to go ahead and jump right in.
You're welcome, Dave. You're welcome.
Let's talk about that Michigan football game. Second half comeback. Where did that come from?
Dave, I mean, it was what a second half it was. I believe we were sitting at the game together actually, and I think you left at halftime, so you didn't really get to see in person. You had to watch the game we taped back at the house, but what a second half it was. It was a tale of two halves, really. In the first half, the offense couldn't do anything. They could not move the ball. They couldn't stop turning the ball over. Still signs from 2 weeks before when they played against Notre Dame and they had 6 turnovers. That's, 11 turnovers in their past 6 quarters up to halftime there. So they just looked horrible. So where did it come from? It all starts at the line of scrimmage. Instead of getting pushed back in that first half on both sides of the line, defensively and offensively, finally started playing smash-mouth football, and it seemed like they got better as the second half went on, Dave.
I would agree with that. I think a lot of credit's got to go to this new coaching staff, getting players in shape, getting them stronger. You can see that the teams definitely wear down in the second half. Michigan takes the ball over. Here's a little stat for you. They've outscored opponents in the second half 46-19, including the 27 points they scored against Wisconsin. I think that's huge. I think it says they're making good adjustments in the locker room, but it's also saying that their players aren't getting tired, and so they might not be competing at the highest level, but they're able to maintain that level throughout the whole game.
Yeah, I think the rest of the Big Ten needs to beware from this game. You saw Wisconsin pretty much dominating them 19-0 at halftime, and then in the second half, it was like a monster just erupted. You saw the team get booed off the field at halftime pretty loudly too, Dave. I'm sure Rodriguez had a couple words to have to his team in the locker rooms there. They came out fired up, and like I said, in the trenches was amazing. That offensive line, particularly the right side, Rodriguez just loved the effort in the second half. David Moosman played a pretty good game. I mean, maybe a sign of the future for games to come. This is a second-half team now, and I think a year ago you wouldn't have seen that second-half effort out of the Lloyd Carr team because, maybe they just didn't have the stamina in the second half. They weren't conditioned the way this team was.
I would agree with that 100%, and also I heard that Terrence Taylor gave a pretty fiery halftime speech as well. So that's good to see that we're finally getting some leadership on that team after losing so many players, especially Henny Hart and Jake Long, 3 of the real leaders on that team. Finally having someone stepping up into that leadership role is huge. And I think we saw finally some quick strike capabilities and big plays in the second half. Interception return for a touchdown, 26-yard touchdown pass. Brandon Miner had an explosive touchdown run. I think those are all signs that point to this offense finally coming around. We could put together a decent first half. I think we'll be in good shape.
Yeah. I mean, plus that defense was amazing. I mean, in that second half, like I said at the beginning of the year on Varsity Blue, I said I think this defensive front seven has a chance to, be very similar to that 06 front seven and how they were the best in the country that year. They have a very good chance to possibly be the best in the Big Ten. I mean, Zay, Taylor, 8 tackles each, averaging 3.6 yards a carry for P.J. Hill and company, and then Brandon Graham. He was awesome. We'll talk about him later. Keeping it in college football, though, Dave, there was some more stuff happening besides in the Big House this weekend. Major shakeup in the polls. 9 ranked teams actually lost and fell in the polls, starting right at the top with USC.
I think this is great for college football. I think it is similar to last season where we're going to see a lot of prominent teams get knocked off because other people have said it before. The talent in college football is spreading out. Smaller schools are now being able to recruit other teams. What do all these teams, or good players, what do these teams have in common? BYU, South Florida, Utah, Boise State, and Connecticut. They're all in the top 25 in the power rankings in the country. Who would have guessed that last year at the beginning of the season? No one would have guessed that. Teams are coming out of nowhere. It's the great time to be a college football fan.
Yeah, I think at the top, you saw USC losing when they went on the road to Oregon State on Thursday night. Georgia losing at home, actually, down 31-0 at halftime to Alabama, who's now the number 2 ranked team in the latest polls out this week. But I think it just shows that you have to come to play every week. No matter who you're playing, USC, go on the road to Oregon State. It happened 2 years ago over there in Corvallis, and now they lose again at Oregon State. potentially a national championship down the drain just because you didn't show up to play in one first half, basically. In the second half, they finally started to wake up and score some points, but by then, Oregon State had too much momentum, and they won that game. So I think both USC and Georgia learned a lesson there. But the key here, Dave, is, I mean, it doesn't matter if you lose this early in the season. Those teams that are ranked in the top 5 or 6 now, they're going to lose this season. Oklahoma, Alabama, LSU, that's Big 12, that's SEC. They got some big games coming up towards the end of the season here, so stay put.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. Georgia, we saw them, they got knocked off by Alabama. I mean, that's huge. Their season's pretty much over. If they win out, they might have a shot to play for the title. But that's also the thing about these smaller schools. Schools like BYU, Utah, Boise State, who play most of their harder games in the beginning of the season when teams are going through their non-conference schedules. They might have 1 or 2 non-conference games throughout the rest of the season. But for now, I mean, they have to play their conferences, which are arguably not as good. They could run the tables and be in the position for a BCS bid.
Yeah, a lot of parity in college football right now, Dave.
That's true. All right, now we're going to move on to the big boys, the NFL, and we're talking about the worst of the worst here. The Detroit Lions, St. Louis Rams, and the Raiders. Who would you not want to be?
Ugly. Well, I'm going to have to go with the Lions here. The Lions just got rid of Millen. The Rams just got rid of the coach Scott Linehan, and the Raiders earlier this week just got rid of Lane Kiffin, finally made that official. Al Davis did. It's got to be the Lions, though, and for this reason only. They have horrible everything. The Raiders have horrible ownership in Al Davis, but they got great players. You look at their roster, great team. The Rams, you know what? Okay, their players aren't as bad as, say, the Lions. And yes, their management isn't as bad as the Raiders. So they're kind of middle of the pack. But then the Lions, they're just horrible. That has to be the worst roster, talent-wise, I've seen in quite a while in the NFL. Horrible management, plus the ownership is just ridiculous. As long as Ford Sr. is running the show here in Detroit, Dave, there's no hope for Lions fans because they're just going to keep waiting and waiting and waiting. It's only been 57 years since their last championship. They've only won 1 playoff game since Ford bought the team back in '64. How much longer can they wait? The worst situation has to be in Detroit.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think the last time the Lions won the championship, it wasn't even the Super Bowl yet.
No, it was. Yeah, it wasn't.
That says a
no
lot.
such thing back
I would agree. The Lions are the worst. They even have the worst coaching situation with Marinelli. He doesn't know what's going to happen at the end of the season. Right now, he could be coaching for a job, but they could bring in a new GM who could say, yeah, you won, 8, 9 games. I'm still going to bring in my own
He's
guy.
a lame duck coach right now. What is he coaching for?
So the players obviously aren't going to play for him there. If you look at the Raiders, they got McFadden, Jamarcus Russell.
Plus they're young players, too.
Yeah,
they have a
young
future
players.
to build.
D'Angelo Hall, Pro Bowl cornerback. Rams, same thing. Steven Jackson, real cornerstone player. They got some really young players on defense. I like Carricker and Chris Long, the draft pick this year. Both real explosive defensive players. The Lions, name one player besides. I mean, you can say Roy Williams, but no one wants him.
Yeah, Roy Williams isn't going. He's not going to be there next year, is he?
Yeah, he's going to be gone. I mean, Calvin Johnson for 2-3 more years before they give him the boot. I mean, no one wants to stay there. It's the worst place for NFL players to go. It's not like Oakland where they have the California weather. Even St. Louis. I mean, it's really Detroit's kind of down on its luck now too, and I think that plays in on it. They're going to have a hard time attracting talent. They're going to have to bring in another new coach next season, along with a new general manager. And if William Clay Ford's still going to try and stick his fingers in the pie, I don't see them having any success.
It's just going to be that same process going over and over again, like it's been probably since 1964, I'd imagine. I don't know, I wasn't around back then, but I'm sure it was just the same process. And, it's really sad for the city of Detroit. I said it last week, and, it looks like it's just going to continue to be that way until they finally get somebody with some brains in that front office. We all know who that is, don't we, Dave?
Moving on. For a job.